Hello and welcome to this Power of One exclusive. To an older generation, the association of the Birlas has always been with the nationalist movement. But to today's MBAs, the association is with Kumar Mangalam Birla and his remarkable transformation of the historic company from a $3 billion group into a $35 billion group. And what is all the more remarkable, that it's been done without a whiff of controversy at a time when almost no leading marquee corporate name in India has not been touched by the hint of scandal. Thanks very much indeed, Kumar, for talking to us. I know how hard it is to get you to do interviews, so thanks very much for that. Now, just at the outset, the group is growing, but the economy is shrinking. And every day we get a revised growth figure, which is now slipped well below the 7% mark. How much does that worry you?
I think that is very worrying, Srinivasan. If you look at the data, and you'd know better than me, last 12 quarters consecutively, the economy has shrunk in a sense. If you look at the last quarter's data, manufacturing has grown by about 0.2%.
Yes.
And for a group like ours, which has a large presence in manufacturing, that is a worrying sign. The fact is that you are today in an environment where policy making is perhaps not as consistent as it requires to be. Visibility on policy, consistency on policy implementation. These are issues that bother me, and I think would bother most people in industry.
That's true. In fact, several of your contemporaries and colleagues and peers have actually spoken about it. And this, you're saying, is a major problem, that decision making in New Delhi has slowed down tremendously.
Well, I don't think it's across New Delhi. I think it's certain departments of the government. So I wouldn't paint everyone with one brush. I don't think that would be fair to do.
Okay.
But yes, I think at some very critical points of decision making, things have slowed down. I think that when the government goes back on commitments it has made, it creates a problem. It creates a confidence crisis, which is not good for the overall sentiment for an investor like us. I mean, that of course is undoubtedly true.
So when you say that there are certain areas, certain departments which particularly have been guilty of this, and also the going back on commitments, give me some examples. You mean, for example, like in the power sector particularly, or in sectors which are broadly energy based or coal dependent, often you
That's
find...
right. I think in terms of acquisition of land, in terms of allocation of coal. So if you have a situation where you've started a project, you've committed on the basis of allocation of coal, you're somewhere near the completion of your project, but your coal linkage is taken away because you have someone come in who believes he has a different point of view. I think that is a very precarious situation to be in.
And this has happened to you?
I think that has happened to a lot of people in industry. The good news is, I think that the government is seized of the situation, and I think in the last couple of months we've seen some very positive developments.
Two examples of that in areas where your group is involved. One was the reversal of the decision on FDI and retail. I know that you don't have, or at least retail is not a very large percentage of your group, but was that surprising when that happened? Were you taken aback?
I think so. I mean, after being announced to be taken back so soon after that is something that was disappointing. I don't think it sends out the best signals. And I think that there has to be recognition of the fact that modern trade coming in isn't going to disrupt the local kirana wala. In fact, the space is large enough
to accommodate all kinds of players.
Coexist, and actually it will create much larger opportunities for employment. So going back on a announcement like that, though it was done soon after, so there was no damage that was incurred on account of that, is a disappointing thing. But at the same time, I think one is quite hopeful that that will happen sooner or later. So I think it's important to focus on the positives as well.
And what about the decision of the cancellation of the telecom licenses, the 122 licenses? There were some licenses of Idea as well, your telecom company, as part of that. again, was that a surprising decision? Were you taken aback when that happened?
Absolutely. Like I've said earlier, it was a bolt from the blue. I think that, we got clubbed with some other operators, whereas our situation was very different. We were in queue. We didn't have the issues that the others had at all.
You've been in the queue since 2006.
That's right. So
that was your argument, that you were already in the queue 2 years in advance.
So it's just that we got clubbed together with others in the 2008 press note. I don't want to dwell too much on that because the matter is sub judice. The only thing I'd like to say is that in a situation like this, it has to be a case-by-case view,
right?
Which of course needs to be transparent. But putting people in buckets,
bracketing him in the same category,
dissimilar in their situations, I think creates a problem.
Now, in terms of the actual number of licenses, I believe there are only between 6 to 9 licenses of yours which have got affected by this and are not in the most commercially important circles. So, perhaps commercially, I don't know if it's a major impact for you as a telecom company, but you feel that it's more the principle of it. Is that a fair way of
Absolutely.
it?
I think that it's the principle of someone going back on the commitment. So that is what is worrying. That is something that I don't think is a good feeling to have for any investor. And commercially, of course, it depends on whether you're looking at the next 3 quarters, 4 quarters, or the next 3 years.
Right.
So the perspective would be different.
But does it raise any questions to you about the overall nature of the telecom sector? Because this is a sector that's really gone through a lot of upheaval and a lot of volatility. Perhaps of all the other sectors in recent times. Do you think that the manner in which the government has handled telecom policy has left much to be asked for?
Well, that's stating the obvious, right? I don't think that there's any dispute around that. So there's no argument around that. I think that things could have been handled much better. The fact is that in the last 17 years that we've been in the business, it's been a real roller coaster ride. I think the regulatory intervention has been huge. It's true for telecom across countries as a sector, but I think in our case it's been much more so than in other countries.
Any second thoughts, because of all the volatility that the telecom sector has faced, about actually exiting telecom?
Not really, because I think that this is a good time to actually be in the telecom sector, much more than ever in the past. I think there will be consolidation that will happen. I think that the stronger players will become even stronger. Idea has a great franchise.
Idea is by revenue right now the third. There's Vodafone, SR, and you're number 3.
Yeah, there's Airtel revenue, Vodafone, and then us.
That's right.
It's the fastest growing in the market, so it's consistently taken in market share. So I think huge potential and upside there.
Kumar, what about interest rates? The RBI has been particularly hawkish over the past year or so, and this is the logic given is because they need to control inflation. But is it now time to start relaxing interest rates?
I think so. I think that inflation is now at much more acceptable levels. I think that the fact that investment is getting
6%.
It's come down to about 6%. The fact that investments are getting hit is something that's very widely recognized as a problem. So I would imagine that from my point of view, as I understand it, I think that we would see interest rates coming off.
And that's, you have the RBI's review in later on in March, just after, in fact, the UP election results. So perhaps the political considerations would also not be so great, because a lot of the decision making has been impacted by the fact that you have elections as well. So would you then expect that the RBI would start relaxing interest rates going forward?
You know, being on the RBI board, Srinivasan, I think that my view clearly is that RBI is a very independent body and functions quite on its own.
Of course.
But I think that interest rates going down is good for us as an economy now, given the fact that investments have got affected. And that like I said, manufacturing growth has come down to 0.2% in the last quarter,
Right.
which is almost zero. We can't afford that. So clearly, interest rates have a role to play there.
There are several dimensions to what has been happening in the policy environment. One of which, of course, is what you mentioned, that the government has rolled back on its commitments and all of that. But a number of senior corporate leaders have also pointed out that there's also the responsibility of the private sector in what has been happening. And I'll just read out to you a line from some of these letters that people like Jamshid Godrej and Deepak Parekh have been writing to the government, where they say it is acknowledged that a strong nexus exists between certain corporates, politicians, bureaucrats and power brokers. This is one of the greatest threats for the Indian economy. Would you agree with that?
You can't sort of generalize the situation again.
Yes.
But, I think that whenever and in whichever country there has been a surge of corporate rivalry, it has created issues. But I don't think that we are unique. I mean, every country has these issues to deal with, and on top of that, we are a thriving democracy. So I think that's pretty much part of the democratic process, whether you like it or not.
There were also questions that came up around the same time. Some of it was linked and some of it was not. But there were questions raised about corporate social responsibility, about contributions of one's own personal wealth as a corporate, something that Warren Buffett raised when he was here. Now, I know that the Birla Group has a very long and old tradition of corporate philanthropy. But what's your take on that? I mean, do you believe that you're already doing a lot? Do you think you can do more?
I think we're doing very significant things. I think my mother spearheads that the whole initiative around rural development and social causes, and I think they do it in a very quiet way, but in ways that makes a very deep impact. On Warren Buffett, to be honest, Srinivasan, my view is that we don't need a Warren Buffett or a Bill Gates to come here and tell us that we need to donate half of our wealth. I think that even an average middle class Indian family would contribute in some way, in some sort of a charitable cause or the other. So I think giving has been an intrinsic sort of part of Indian culture. That is my view.
Would you say that? Would you say that of corporate India?
I think corporate India is now coming of age where giving is concerned. I think that people are sort of being more upfront about it. People are thinking more about it. I think also given the fact that companies now can afford to donate more to or participate more in social causes is something that can't be overlooked. But I must say that there are lots of people who do very good work,
right,
which is not known of because they do it very quietly.
It's very invisible. But I think the point that the Warren Buffett, Bill Gates team was making was not so much corporate social responsibility, but leading corporate citizens actually donating portions of their personal wealth, almost like half of it or even more. That is something which certainly we haven't seen a lot of in India.
Well, I don't know why we should see that. I mean, I think that's a very one-on-one decision. I mean, it's a very personal decision. You might want to donate 80% of your personal wealth. So I don't see why a Warren Buffett or a Bill Gates needs to pontificate on how much of your personal wealth you should be donating to social causes. That's not something that I agree with.
You didn't attend his lunch or dinner or whatever it was when he was here, clearly.
I couldn't attend it, but having said that, one has met with Bill Gates. One has great respect for him, for his business acumen. I really enjoyed my interactions with him.
Right.
But this is not something that I would equate with, I would sort of relate with or agree with. To put out a mandate that people must, contribute a certain amount of their personal wealth or corporate.
Right. I mean, I don't know if it was so much a mandate as it was just a kind of a friendly suggestion, but made obviously by these two very powerful individuals. So it came